I would like to welcome to this session. It's about health data and patients' participation in the field of healthcare and healthcare innovation. And to start, I think it would be good just to have a round of a brief introduction. Everybody introduces themselves. I start. My name is Thomas Brenzikofer. I'm a manager on behalf of Basel Area Swiss, which has the Healthcare Innovation Initiative Day One. And I have been co-founding this together with experts from the industry some 5 years ago. Actually, Michael Rayban, with the call here, has also been there at the very beginning of the Day One. And we are building a community of healthcare innovators here in Basel. And one of the projects we have conducted on the health data is what we're still doing is the health data scenarios. So we're trying to find out what kind of scenarios will there be in the near future or in the future, how to best govern health data for the benefit of industry, innovation, and of course for the people. And yes, that's my background, my perspective. May I ask Katrin to shortly introduce herself and maybe just say what you are working on currently related to health data, right? Thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you, Thomas. So my name is Katrin Kramery. I'm heading the Personalized Health Informatics Group at the Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics. And we are in the process of implementing the Swiss Personalized Health Network initiative. This is a government initiative with the aim of promoting the usability, but also the exchangeability of health-related data with a strong focus on routinely collected data from the healthcare system to make better use of that data for research purposes. And one of our major focus areas is data interoperability, but actually we are tackling the entire FAIR category. So we would like to make health data in Switzerland better findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable for research purposes.
Thank you, Katrin. And what are you working on currently? So what is your your most pressing challenge that you have, like when you go back to office again or this evening?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, interoperability is really the biggest challenge that we have. I mean, other than data not being available in a structured or standardized format, this is of course, but this is what we expected. But with interoperability, it's really always more problems than you expected. And so what we are currently working on is we try to really break it down to 3 pillars. We try to give data a clear meaning that is understandable or interpretable, not only by humans, but also by machines. So we need a strong semantic layer on the first pillar. Then we need a flexible format to transport and store the data, right? Also to ensure that interoperability is not granted only within within one project, but also between the projects and ideally in entire Switzerland over time, right? This is the idea. And then we would like to leave the freedom to the researchers as the third pillar to use whatever data model they want to work with, because there is a big variety of possibilities. You want to use OMOP, or you want to, for clinical research, you would rather go for a CDISC model. So this is really then decidable by the research, and this is how we want it. But this also means we have to be able to bridge these pillars, and in terms of standardization of data, bringing international ontology knowledge to the data, not only code the data in these controlled vocabularies, but also use the additional information that is there. For example, if you look at an ontology like SNOMED, you can use all this knowledge from this ontology to also interpret your data. And this is actually currently what we are working on.
So can I quickly ask, actually,
Yes.
if basically the way you're preparing this, could you then increasingly automate reasoning based on those machine interpretable semantics?
Well, I mean, this is of course one of the final goals, right? But at the moment, we are really more in the methodology let's say, sector in bringing kind of an semi-automation, or let's call it efficiency to the processes. Because what we actually want to do then, of course, once we have the data in these individual projects, this is exactly what we would like to aim for. But in order to get there, we have to make sure that for example, we work closely together with the university hospitals in Switzerland, and we need the hospitals to be able to deliver this data in a way that research projects can also afford the work that is needed to recruit that data, right? And this is why we would like to get these processes, these workflows, these pipelines professionalized in a way that, at least for a, let's say, certain core data set of clinical variables, researchers can take it for granted that this data can be recruited, let's say, efficiently, so that it doesn't take ages and it doesn't cost a lot of money to get this data.
Okay, I mean, it's one of the biggest fascinating projects we have in Switzerland, actually, on this health data. I think everybody expects that, right? Sort of going into the future of data-driven medicine. But let's finish the round, or continue the round. Nice panel here with diverse backgrounds. Natalie, you are more from the legislation side, right, and the entrepreneurship side. Can you maybe introduce yourself?
Yes, hi. So my name is Natalie Raoul, and I'm heading up the VLS group. I am an IP lawyer by background for the biotech world, for the life science environment. And since for the last 14 years now, I've moved into executive search on one hand, but also setting up startups with the help of investors. So I'm the bridge between investors and startup, and that's what we do day in, day out.
And your relation to health data on a daily basis, what you do?
Well, the relationship with, I mean, as I said this morning, the relationship with data is on two folds. One is we have access to a lot of people's data, and we are, of course, compliant with the GDPR guidelines of Europe, and similar guidelines which have different names in the US, because in the US they also have something similar. And then in terms of setting up companies, especially in the rare disease area, we deal with people's data all the time, especially, as I said this morning, pediatric data.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathalie. With data metrics, as the name says, you must be very deep into this data issues, right? Please.
Yeah, that's true. We are quite deep into data issues. So, hi everyone. I'm Ahmed Rally. I'm the CEO of Data Metrics. At Data Metrics, what we do is that we turn data into information. So what Catherine was saying is that they enable the access to data. That having access to data.
I've come across it. I'm pretty sure I've come across it.
Access to data doesn't guarantee you get the information. So once we use the data available, data we have access to, and try to find the information within the data, information that will allow our customers to take decisions or new path forward or get a new indication, and so on and so forth. To the question, Thomas, about what we are working on, actually, there are two interesting projects we're working on when it comes to data. And the first one is on real-world evidence data, where we are trying to emulate results from a randomized clinical trial by using health records, so patient records from and that's quite a challenge, as data from clinical trial is structured data, is endpoints are already predefined, and trying to do that with health records, that's quite a challenge. But we got some interesting results, and this work will be published soon. The other project that I think is quite interesting is a new. We are doing a meta-analysis on multiple melanoma, comparing all the product in the market, even the product that have not been compared one-to-one. So there are methodologies, statistical methodologies, that you can at the end compare them all one-to-one and look for the best profile when it comes to safety and efficacy. So those are the two interesting projects I took with me today to this forum.
Okay, thank you very much, Ahmed. So just to be aware, I have a little bit of issues with my computer. It's very hot here, so I hope it will not burn up. But let's continue. So maybe I will have to go out to come back, but you just please continue to introduce yourself. So maybe we go on with Michael, and then and meanwhile, I also would like to say that to everybody that please, your questions are welcome. Just type them into the chat. We will take them from there. Thank you very much. And yes, please, yeah, may I ask you yourself?
Yes, with pleasure. So my name is Galia Kontova, and I'm a lecturer and researcher at the University of Applied Sciences in Basel. And my research focus is on blockchain applications in the economy, particularly in the healthcare sector.
Okay. And what is your current issue on the health data? So what are you working on? Just shortly.
My current project on which I work is a use case for the PharmaLedger project, which is an EU project involving 29 partners. I am now writing the use case for the first pilot, the electronic product information, the e-leaflet, which I'm supposed to submit to the ISO TC 307 working group on use cases.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then we go. Michael, please, from Novartis. What just introduce yourself and tell us what is your current relation to health data? What are you working on the moment?
Yeah, so my name is Mike Repan. I'm a scientist working in Novartis, and basically in the transition area between research, translation, and clinical and real world. So we're looking at the relationship between what we can understand from the real world and what we need to know in trials, similar to what Ahmed has explained. And specifically, what I'm very interested in as a scientist is understanding more about early stages of disease and what we can predict in patient journeys. So when interventions would still be able to have a strong effect, but then symptoms are not so strong. So how would you be able to use the increased ability to do predictions, the increased ability to have real-world data, more biomarkers that are coming, combine these things into solutions where you'll be able to see, okay, who has a higher risk of an upcoming event and how do you act on it in a particular setting, make decisions on it and all that. And so that all that is like without data, you basically can just dream about it, really. I think Thomas got frozen, looks like.
Yeah, and I think as you said, Mike, that's why we have as a motto at Datametrics, we turn data into information. As data does not equal information, and that's something that I think we need to emphasize on. If you but having data is very important. The access to data is vital, but the information that you take out from that's the product. That's what we should also focus on. I think that Katrine's work and Galia's work is very important, but there is still another step which is as equally important, is to take the information out of that.
There's different layers of the same cake here.
Yeah.
But maybe, Michael, can you explain a bit more? So what kind of data you're using? Do you bring data together from different sources? So do you have an interoperability problem?
Of course, you cannot get rid of interoperability problem. It's very hard. But let's say so classic thing is in the pharma, you try to get everything behind your firewall and then integrate it and so on. That's not what I'm doing. So what I'm trying to develop is actually a model where you can avoid that. And you can do partnerships where even like the pharma doesn't have to go into all the data at patient level and so on. So you can also build also new kind of partnerships, but still the knowledge can be integrated. But I wouldn't say that I have the total solution for this. But basically you think like in the sense of knowledge and innovation ecosystems, how can you enrich that learning experience, cast a wider net, really put it a bit more in open science space. And so there's more public and open source code and so on. And that connects back to the inner pieces that are closer to the pipeline. So you can imagine, let's say you have a lot of patient journeys, a little bit like what Søren Brunak does, the sequential patterns of A is before B, then B is before C. And you can expand and abstract that concept even further with AI. And then you say, okay, what does it mean to have a similar patient journey? And is that predictive for what's going to happen in the future? And it's a relatively generic concept. So there are many new academic algorithms on these things that look quite promising and potentially scalable. And that's why we want to test and see if build like an open source framework for that.
But sorry, one quick question on that. But that the precondition for this is that you understand what A, B, and C is, right? Do you always understand that from the data?
Well, let's say, for example, you have diagnostic things. It's like you have ICD-9 and 10 with some of the data sets. You have SNOMED mapping and some others. So usually most of them can, I think, be reasonably combined to SNOMED. But for example, ICD-9 in the disease spaces I'm interested in, they're much more coarse-grained than ICD-10. So in ICD-10, often you don't have that many years to go backwards. And so you have all these practical issues there, just ICD-9 and 10 type thing. But then you have like all the other codes, not only diagnostic codes. You want to have drug codes, like what's the relationship, as Ahmed said, also different interventions they had, the outcomes they got. These are all different types of modeling. So how do you integrate that? You know, there's a lot of cool algorithms in the market now, but how do you create a comprehensive decision-making structure? Because academic algorithms, it's not really straightforward to see how they get validated and really become useful. So the step beyond this, creating cool new algorithms and making them useful, is not so developed at the moment, actually. So there's a lot of companies saying they can do this, and yeah, I almost believe it.
Now, yeah, we have worked in some concrete projects in terms of algorithm especially within the psychiatric field, where you can, when there are protocols how to identify E, B, and C. And then especially if the patient will relapse into backward into B or go forward into C. So and in that we have had some experience in developing algorithm to identify which patient should be you should have close look at, or the doctor should look at closely. Maybe they have the highest risk of relapsing.
And so how do you do that in your company? Let's say you find a promising algorithm, it looks very interesting, so you need to make also the investment to validate it and so on. Can you actually stem that yourself, or have to find partners to then validate and then wrap around their products?
We validate ourselves, so we had the full infrastructure to do that, and that's why we are specialized. We all work only on life science, so we work only with biotech and pharma companies. And since the start of the company, we build up infrastructure and knowledge how to validate. That's what makes us very niche specifics in the field. Exactly what you said, the validation of our algorithm and programs.
And one thing I forgot to mention, maybe to link a bit what Galia is doing, is actually I'm very interested in see how blockchain type environments can be used for this kind of open science space, so that different pieces and open source groups and what they're working on like gel together, like these distributed autonomous organizations experiments. This is all very early stuff nowadays. Who knows if it works, but it's pretty fun to watch. So a little bit of social innovation also.
From my point of view, blockchain is a layer on top of the layers you discussed, the interoperability of data exchange. And the biggest advantage that it offers from my point of view is this access control and trusted data exchange, but it's the access control. The exchange of the data itself is something that is being also regulated, and there is a standard, for example, the standard for data exchange based on the RDF's model, right? You're aware about this. But the blockchain actually just provides a framework, a layer on which the access control should be regulated, and the traceability. A third benefit is, of course, that on the blockchain you can develop a network effect, and you can have many partners that could agree on this access control, and then the data sharing, however, takes place according to the standards that you also discussed, right? The interoperability of data, the RDF model, for example, as a standard, or I guess Catherine is working on maybe on a very specific standard for the health industry. And but what you, Michael, mentioned about the social partnerships, right? About how do I build this partnership or this network? This could be facilitated by the blockchain. I would agree here.
That's exactly the context in which I'm interested in it. So I see it as a really interesting proposals, but they're all a little bit early to judge if it's going to work. So you have to decide also which experiments you actually engage in. So mostly look into what people are involved, really.
This is correct, and it starts with the network. And now we have these projects that, for example, the Pharma Ledger has 29 partners, right? And this would be a starting base, in my view, to integrate many additional partners, right, that would be interested in this data exchange.
We have some interesting questions in the chat also.
Yes, I have just seen that the first one on biobanks, and again, the question if there are tech-based solutions, how to better bring a proper data handling and sharing and bringing those together. So I don't know, maybe Ahmed or Katrin, or I think it's a very technical question, or even Michael, are you aware of some technologies in that space? Or maybe also Galia could elaborate a bit on what the blockchain could do to bring these different sources together.
Yeah, I have the impression that a lot of this biobank stuff is not about the technical issues. It's a lot about the governance, the legal framework, how they were set up and all that. And often that was done in a much more conservative setting. And then it's not so easy how to transform that like any other organizations. They have this governance is not, I don't know what Katrin thinks if she has this kind of interfaces.
I'm really happy to give you a little more background on the, let's say, other side that we are also working on in SPHN and the Swiss Institute of Bioinformatics. So what we are actually building in the realm of SPHN is this Biomed IT network. This is a secure and protected IT infrastructure that is spread over three let's say they are IT service, scientific IT service nodes. So one is the node from the ETH in Zurich, one belongs to the University of Basel, and then there is another one in Lausanne of SIB and the University of Lausanne. And what we are basically anticipated back at the time already in 2013, 2014 was rather that, there was in Switzerland, there have been very many secure infrastructures, so like in the hospitals, but they lacked compute power. So, and we had the other way around. We had a lot of compute power, like in the CSCS in Lugano, but not for sensitive data. So that was the idea why Biomed IT was funded by our government. And what we have now is this secure infrastructure where data directly flows in, either from the data providing institutions like a hospital, or if you think now of biobanks, you have samples, they go to a let's say a technology center that does the analytics, right? And then the DNA sequence or whatever analytics is being done with these samples is directly fed into the secure environment. Also, you know, all the legal and ethical documents attached to that project, and data is only gathered when there is a concrete project, there is an ethics approval for that project, and the data, and this is now the best part of it, stays in this secure infrastructure. Researchers can connect remotely and use also the compute power of our network. And they can also, and this is another very important prerequisite nowadays, they can work jointly on this data set. So everybody from different institutions all around Switzerland, even from abroad, could connect remotely and work on the same data set. And our policy is individual data, so information about individual patients is not allowed to leave this infrastructure. And of course, we have technical measures to make sure that some things don't happen. But most of them, of course, is contractual agreements with the people who work on that, with the users who work on that infrastructure. And this is actually now, when you look internationally, seems to be the way to go. There is a lot of administrative overhead attached with this because, you know, it's complicated. You cannot just have the data, take it onto your machines and do whatever you want with it. But it, of course, also adds to the trust that people have in sharing their data. And it's also a good, and I think I'm pretty sure we come to this aspect also during this hour. You know, you have to think of, for example, the consent that people give when they want to share their data. They agree to share their data. They give consent. In Switzerland, it's even a general consent, right? I can go to a university hospital. They ask me, can we use your data for research purposes? And I say yes. What if I change my mind? In 2 years, maybe I want to change my mind and I do not want this anymore. How is that being controlled for? You know, if the data is just given away out of hands to the next hand, nobody can guarantee me anymore that my data is not in a data set that's being widely used around the country. And so keeping data in the secure environment is one measure. I don't say it suits for all the use cases, but it's one aspect or one use case, one particular method, how you could keep data together, where you also do not have the need for a blockchain, for example, and you do not have the need for, let's say, or you do not have the risks that you face when you think of data security, data privacy, but also patient privacy, if you wish.
I have a question, Catherine. So what about standards, data standards? Are do you store the data? Do you get the data as it is and store it and allow access, or do you have the possibility to structure the data?
Yes.
And follow one standard?
Yes.
And my second question, just to show you have the two, are you collaborating with EU in this matter to have kind of interconnectivity?
Yes. So first, to answer your first two questions, so basically what we have is we are data, you know, Switzerland is a very, very federated country, or federal country. Everything is federated, nothing is centralized, which is good on the one hand side. And so data stays with the data providers. So that means every data provider has the control of their patient data, or the patient has the control of their patient data in case of corporations like MeData or others. And they are only put together in on the occasion of a very concrete research project, which is important. There's no data lake. Nobody can just plug in and suck data out. It's only brought together on the special occasion for one research project. And it's also sealed so that research projects are segregated. They cannot, you cannot do your analysis over all your 5 research projects that you're running on this infrastructure. This is the technical inhibition that we introduce by default. And so data is basically only brought together for the research projects. And now you can imagine that, of course, this could be done, and we are aligning and are in very close exchange with international standardization initiatives, but also other collaborators worldwide. When we say now, if you now agree on, let's say, the order or the format, how you have the data in one place, you could of course send the algorithm to the data, right? You do not have to bring the data together in one spot. You can bring workflows in containers to the data and then just move the analysis to the data rather than the data to the point of analysis. And this is what we also do. So we are involved in an international project currently with the main hub is in the Netherlands, in Maastricht, and basically this is all work in progress. We are exercising this at the moment, but it's a very important development, because for certain types of data, for example, genetic data, genomic data, that should not be or cannot be shared over the border. This is basically the methodology to go. You just have to decide what kind of technology you want to use for it. There are several technologies on the market that you can choose from, depending if you work with genomics or if you work with images. It really depends. And then, of course, it has to be, the interoperability problem is not solved. It's just an investment then in every location, in every hub, so to say, rather than the central investment that we have when we bring data together in one spot.
So
I have a question because, of course, we all know that you sign a form, for research purposes. Your data, do you allow your data to circulate? And is there a framework by which people can always follow what happens to their own data, or no?
You mean
I'm talking about Switzerland.
Yeah, no, in Switzerland, this would be kind of a dynamic consent, right? That would be the aim or the goal, for at least for those people who are interested in following. So I assume in the future there will be the different choices that you can make. If you are a patient that says, I don't care, use my data for everything. I don't even care if it's going to academic research or industry. This would be the one option. But then you would, of course, also have the other option of people being very interested in what happens to their data. So they could, choose this dynamic consent and then maybe have an app and decide on a case by case basis if they would like to contribute their data to this project or to that project. I can imagine that there are very different mindsets of people, that, and I think what the most important part is, people need patients as well as healthy citizens. They should need the last say in it. Do they agree that we use their data? And I'm also strongly defending, although the law allows it in Switzerland, that you could use the phenotypic data without any consent. But I think this should not be the way to go. We should ask people, we should make them aware of what can be done with the data, because it's important. Well, we are, at least I think all of us here are convinced that it is important that we use the data for the further development of the quality of the healthcare system. And this is an important step towards trust, in my opinion, that we ask everybody. And those who do not want to engage, that's fine, because the majority engages in Switzerland. This is at least what we see in the hospitals. We have consent rates of up to 85%, depending, of course, a little who asks and where it is asked and what setting it is asked. But normally people understand that this is an important step and they engage.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. The question is, the meaning of my question is that with GDPR, for instance, you can only keep the data for a number of months, and then every year you need to ask people in your database whether they are happy with you to keep that data, and as such update their data, give them the opportunity to update their data or not. So it's a constant back and forth. You can't just keep it and just do whatever you want. You have to be proactively going back to the people and making sure that they still agree.
Yeah, that's true. But in the healthcare system, it's kind of a different story. In the healthcare system, they need to keep the data 10 years anyway. So, but you're right. I mean, after a certain point, of course, you would have to renew also your general consent.
Thank you. So I would like to pick a question from the chat, and that I think should go to Gal. It's about the usage of blockchain in the Bitcoin, right? And the question is, that needs a high amount of computing power, costs, and also energy. I think it's at the moment it's like the size of Argentina for Bitcoin. So is that necessarily the case also for other applications like the ones you're working on in the healthcare sector use case?
So the short answer is no. For enterprise blockchains, we don't need this consensus that is used by the Bitcoin blockchain. Blockchain is a technology that actually is known to the scientific community at least since 30-40 years, but to the market it appeared with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is the so-called public blockchain, and on public blockchains there is a certain consensus mechanism that requires really very much computing power, because we have miners, and the blocks that are created, they have to be also available on the computers of these miners that are worldwide. We don't know in which country, because it's a public open blockchain. Anyone can join this blockchain. When we talk about enterprise projects, as the ones in healthcare, we have mostly the so-called enterprise or private blockchains. And here, one of the most popular blockchains used is the Hyperledger. And when you have such a private closed blockchain, then the trust is already provided by the consortium, right? Because it's a private, and there are nodes that agree to set up this private blockchain. And this facilitates the use of a consensus mechanism, which is energy efficient. So, of course, Ethereum, it's a public blockchain. It also has an enterprise solution, right? But it's different than Ether, the payment, the public blockchain used only for payment purposes. So basically, if we use a blockchain for cryptocurrencies, payments, then we have the Bitcoin, we have Ether, we have stable coins. And then now the governments are developing central bank digital currencies, right? They're also payment instruments. But when we talk about blockchain projects in the private sector, for enterprise, for business purposes, then we have a completely different governance structure. And then these are energy efficient projects.
Okay, so it's sustainable technology, or it can be made sustainable, right?
Right.
There is another question in the chat from Stefano. I have to go back. So he's kind of asking, so with a new data, let's say, ecosystem, we could actually have some data in the wallets and then put them or give them to whomever we like to, right? On whatever conditions we like to. This is a totally, let's say, people-owned kind of scenario. It's also a scenario we have developed in our day one practice. So this would be also that they could also, so people could also actively participate in studies, etc. So maybe we ask this question first to Michael. Is that a vision that you would like as a researcher, that you can actively go to the end consumer or to the people, to the citizen, and say, do you want to participate, or do you want to share your data so I can, do my science magic on them and then come back with a solution? Or is this something you envision?
Well, let's say, I mean, the industry I'm part of, the pharma industry and other medically oriented, they have a strong and long tradition of evidence-based medicine, where you have to evidence. There's a history of trials and statistics that is very important, and using that, there hasn't been a lot of room for these kind of. But nowadays, also real-world data, as we discussed also with Ahmed, is coming in. You have more questions coming in. You're looking at the patient and user experience. You're looking at a whole range of different questions. And I think that also means you're going to see much more diversity of different models of evidence gathering, engagement, collaboration. You can see this is getting much more diverse right now. Many companies are doing new kind of partnerships and start to invest in them. And this livens up the market, and people also have different expectations. They want to try new things now because they've seen others, they've seen the examples for it, and then they get ideas for new ones. So you cannot bring that back anymore. So I think there's going to be basically a competition of different models of what works when. Right now we cannot say, or in some cases we can say more, like when a particular real-world evidence study works and what kind of questions. There's a lot of expertise. But what you're asking here, I think this is the really new hot stuff that a lot of people want to explore now. But predicting if it would work or not, I don't know. Like, so as a scientist, I say there's no evidence to judge. But as somebody who likes innovation, I find it's pretty cool. So, but that's not the same.
I would like to add that there is nothing new into this, as the pharma are already paying for the data they are getting. So they pay the site, they pay the hospital a fee of the time they spend on the data and during the clinical trials. But if that model can be transcribed and put on, getting the data directly from the patient, I don't think that'd be big of a change for the pharma industry, which is only, there are some legal and ethical challenges to be solved, of course, but I mean, practically is not a big step for the pharma industry.
Don't forget regulators, they also play a certain role here.
Of course.
Don't forget interoperability.
And don't forget trust in data. So if the patient or the people delivers data, how can you make sure that what they measure is what they measure, right?
Actually, I think by saying what I said, I was also answering another question in the form, was if it says, and if patients could track where the data is used, they may get a share in the value their data generate. So that was a way of answering that question as well. So I think it would be hard for science, because research is basically aiming towards a good goal, towards like finding a cure for something for a group of people, for society benefit. It's not individual benefit, like if you look at Google's and other that they use the data to generate clicks or something similar. In research is different. I think finding a model where the patient can sell their data will be challenging. That's my personal opinion, because
I put a link in the chat for exactly such a program in Europe, which is from Sitra in Finland. So they have, I think, probably the best competence in Europe on exactly those questions. But much of it is small-scale pilot projects. So you have to see if they actually scale, and they're not always close to medicine, because like it's difficult to do these kind of pilot projects close to medicine. So we still have to see like how far that comes in actually. And I just want to quickly connect maybe what Katrin's comment and the other ones here, because let's say the history of the data semantics and interoperability, when you go back to the ancient history of the internet, when it came up and people had big dreams, and it was Tim Berners-Lee with his semantic web and all that. And look at what he's doing now. He's exactly into that kind of stuff and building startups. So people are interested, they may want to check Tim Berners-Lee, actually what he's doing. But I have no idea how that's going, to be honest. But we may be on the transatlantic side here in the call, so people may actually know more. Please put it in the chat.
Yeah.
So if we stay on the transatlantic side, on our side, basically we have, I think in most of the countries, we have, let's say in most of those countries who have not been invested in digitization of the healthcare system for such a long time. We have some very positive examples in Europe. Denmark is a very good one. Finland is also a good one. Estonia is a great one. But yes, exactly. There are many more, but there are basically two profound problems when we think of patient being able to get their own data, to have their own data, and give it further for example, research purposes. The first problem is that most of the relevant data, so not the relevant data for the particular treatment of the patient, but the relevant data for the patient as an entity, is in unstructured form. So basically it's in reports, in exit reports of hospitals, or even handwritten in some dossiers of doctors in private practices. This is the first problem. And the second problem is, even if we have structured data, it is structured with a straight view to the reimbursement, right? It's the billing that counts. That's the money that hospitals earn with for the service they provide, and that's fair enough. This is even there we have a legal basis that says exactly that they can do that, but that might not, the ICD-10 code we find then in these dossiers is not really the ICD-10 code we are interested from a research side. So, and these are the two problems. So if you think now, we can think in the future that a patient gathers all their data and has it, but we have to have the step in between where we say, where is the structuring and the standardization come from? If it comes directly from the healthcare system, all the better, then we are there. But in Switzerland, we are not there. Also in many other European countries, we are not there. And this is really the question now, who puts this investment into the data? Because of course, we could say now all the medical doctors should change their daily practice in capturing data, but this would probably not be possible because it takes a lot of time and they have enough to do on their plate. So how do we get this additional investment into the, I do not want to say curation of data, but it's something like that. We talked about, I heard this morning, you talked a lot about data quality, and you could also say the fit for purpose of the data, because quality is always a kind of a perspective thing. But when we now say, for example, if we want to use the data only for statistics, this is one purpose. But if we want to do epidemiological readouts, we have registries, and registries are costly. We pay a lot of money to get the data into these registries in a form that they are interpretable and, over time. And this is not, how do we do that now with routine data from the healthcare system? Somebody has to do this investment, and it's either the hospital or it's somebody in between, because the patient cannot do it, right?
Yeah. So, Catherine, there is the US model, which is where the investment came from the insurance companies, because the insurance company understood very quickly that by having structured data and doing analytics, they can find the risk. And if they can manage to find the risk and calculate the risk, they can have better offerings. And they can impose that on hospitals and say, I'm paying you, you have to give me the data and this structure. That's maybe, I think for Europe, that will be difficult to impose, as the model is totally different. Maybe in Switzerland that can be the case, as we, you know that better than me. I'm putting the question out there, but what you just described this is exactly what happened in the US, and it seems to be working, where data is a commodity, and we can access data, and we have different kind of data to analyze.
Yeah, I think the big question here is it working for the patient and for the people. Are they comfortable with an insurance knowing maybe some stuff I don't know? And then, yeah, I see it in my insurance policy, right? Or
yes, no. If you take the US as an example, yes, because driving, if we look at FDA filings, 2019, it was 40% of the trials had real world data on it, and in 2020 it was almost 74%. So yes, it's driving development. We are getting new drugs into the market faster. We are using more data and so on. And it benefits the patient this way. But there, the other aspect, which is the ethical, which is how much do we want the insurance companies to know about. But so and that's still the same dilemma. And to be honest, I'm not the one who can answer those questions.
Yeah. Exactly, and I don't think it's an either or. The insurance companies will know this anyway at a certain point. It's just maybe they get there faster when we take a systematic approach to it. But we have to think of how can we protect people from discrimination or potential discrimination at the back end. It's not that we should not now think of good strategies, how to make use of this data, or how to bring, exactly as you said, Ahmed, you bring incentives into the system that we get there faster. This is, it's going to happen anyway. We just have to protect our people at the end, saying insurance companies are not allowed to use this information whatsoever, for example, as it is in Switzerland, for the basic coverage. It is just not, and there's a law. And then, yeah, of course, for private insurances, but this is already the case today. You don't need further digitization to be discriminated from private insurances. You are that already now. If you have a chronic autoimmune disease, you will never get a private insurance.
Yeah,
I
but
don't know
the
if you want
difference,
one, but
but the difference, Catherine, is that in the near future, it will you will not be. They will know beforehand that you will get it to be chronic, so they know from your data that you have a high risk to be, have a certain disease, and that disease is costly, and they don't want to insure you probably. So those are the ethical issues of allowing the data. And then when you have aggregated data, large data sets, and also genetic data, and you know what, you can put everything together and come to conclusions that are probably not in the best interest of the patient.
Exactly, but this is exactly where we now would have to have innovative legal solutions, right? This is what we actually need, and not blocking the forefront and saying, oh no, don't use the data, and otherwise the insurance company knows something about you. I think that's just not the way it goes.
I totally agree. So more concretely, what's going on in Switzerland in terms of standards inter-hospitals in the country? Is there like an eSource ready program that all the hospitals will enter, let's say, a data point the same in Zurich or in Geneva or in Basel?
So basically what we have this on the care level, our e-health strategy in Switzerland that takes care since 2007 actually of these levels where we also of the technical interoperability, most importantly. That is not so important for the research because it's an ETL process. You get it out there. It's not so, it doesn't have to have these functioning interfaces. But we have this on the technical, on the syntactic, and also on the semantic interoperability of our e-health network, so to say, with a, let's say, special view to the electronic patient dossier that has been introduced as a law in Switzerland and should kick into force soon. But we have already the first of these electronic patient dossiers running in some parts of Switzerland. And this is really along the care process, right? So patient leaving the hospital, going back to the doctor in private practice and getting the information not by fax anymore or by email, but having this exchange. And there at the moment, this is still like a PDF exchange format, if you wish. But of course, the aim is to bring that to a structured level and standardized level. And eHealth, our government is paying our SNOMED CT license since many years. Because of that, it came not from the research sector; it came from the eHealth sector, and they also, look into laboratory standards like LOINC to have lab values delivered in a standardized way, and so on. So this is the healthcare sector. And of course, we work closely together with them because actually we want exactly the same things. So all the prerequisites that research have to data, they have it in the healthcare sector anyway, and not only for the exchange in terms of an electronic patient dossier, but maybe if you look at the quality insurance, if you look at the patient safety, if you look at the business development, if you look at the decision tools, decision-making tools that they would like to have in the clinic, they all need the same type of data. So we have to join forces and bring these incentives. As you said, we have to have a political willingness to bring the incentives. And this is currently still in Switzerland not something that is, in the hands of somebody really driving it. It's fragmented, and this makes it inefficient and maybe also costs too much time and also maybe money, instead of really combining forces and say, now we need a master plan, how we get this done.
Yeah.
May I say something? I mean, I think I completely understand and support the necessity of gathering all this data and transforming into information and so on for the greater good of everybody, of society in general. But we need to have in place, which I don't think we have today, a counterpower taking into account the individual. Because if you don't have that in place, you will create in fact, a society with different levels. The ones who are deemed by some algorithm that they can be insured, that they can be part of this and that, whatever, and the others who can't. And then you end up in a society where it gets totally out of control. We won't be able to control it anymore.
So actually,
And I think that's why we always need to get all this data, all this gathering, all this information back to the patient at some point, because the patient is you, me, everybody, the individual. And if you don't have that, there is no counterpower. So
actually, Natalie, it's a good point, but there is a lot happening. If we look from the industry, and as we are very close to the pharma and biotech industry, the patient advocacy group are getting more and more stronger, and they are getting noticed, and they are important. So the industry actually listen to them a lot, and they are taking initiatives.
Yes, I completely agree with you, especially in the rare disease. And I was mentioning the pediatrics, the patients associations, they are gathering pace and certainly a lot of power. And that is an absolute necessity, an absolute must.
And they seem very well informed, actually much better informed than our politicians, because they know the value data brings, and they're willing to share the data, but they want to follow up and see where my data is coming and why I'm sharing my data.
They want to remain in control.
Exactly. And we have even been contacted with a patient advocacy group a couple of months ago. They want us to agree to gather a lot of data. It's on rare disease area, and they requested an analysis because and they want to take that analysis to the European Parliament and ask for free healthcare for those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are taking, many initiatives, as Catherine said, but maybe we're lacking this collaboration and someone who leads the work and take, put everything together and connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's
something as simple as the yellow card. Not many people know it exists. You have side effects. You should be able to file a yellow card, but who knows that? But that's the control. That's the power of the individual, not the power of the patient.
And I think that plays to an important educational argument. So you're always going to have the highly educated, highly aware, highly organized groups with a lot of access to this or that, having less issues, and the one with less of that. So you also need, I think what you call as counterbalancing would be a lot about actually this digital upskilling, literacy, and like if they have the tools to act to see when something needs to be shifted. And that's an overall society thing. Like, do we invest in that kind of thing?
Basically, there are only two different scenarios. Either the politicians take this in charge and decide to, this is something important and we need to secure the future, or there will be another actor, an entity, something will take this space and fill it in. So we will not stop this development. It's impossible. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, and I think and what their voters want them to do, right? So that goes back to Michael. So you need this literacy, you need health literacy, data literacy in order to actually have the ask there to say, hey, do something about it, right? I'm looking at watch. So if anybody here in the room has a question, that would now be to really fastly type it in. I think one question we could take. Otherwise, I would start finishing round here. And yes, what did we learn of today's discussions? So as Katrin said, a political will. I mean, there needs to be a will to shape things, right? And that needs to be with society at large. So that was one big issue that we have. And then there are new forms coming up, and makes it also very exciting, right? So actually, we have one question I saw here. Oh no, that's sort of an advertising from Youssef. Sorry. So on the other side, I think we're living in really exciting times as there are new forms of engagement, the blockchain. We start to discuss. This is very exciting. And I think that most of the issues are maybe not of technical nature. They're more of organizational, societal, and educational nature, right? So if I hear here, there are some issues, but mostly it's political or legislation, regulation, etc., that we need to catch up with the actual factual technical revolution that we have. So any comments, final comments, please let me hear you.
As you said, Thomas, the technology is there. We can do basically anything, everything, if when the data is starting to get collected, but we need to have framework of where how we work and what is okay, what is not okay. So that's what's needed, the framework. Yeah.
Yes, and someone needs to pay for that framework, as Katrin pointed out, right? I mean, it's a huge thing, and nobody is actually stepping in and taking charge of it. So I personally hope that the next time we discuss, hopefully in a physical, right, with a nice drink, and so I hope that we will see more actions coming up and being, tried out, pilot projects, etc., that we can talk about actual factual things and get them done and implemented in a bigger scale. Okay, and I think it's very important to learn from each other also at that stage. To exchange ideas like we have done in this discussion. I would like to thank everybody for joining. I think we had a good discussion, a great discussion, and see you all next time in another context. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you,
Have a
Thomas.
nice evening.
Thank you, everyone.